Hey everyone, if you're anything like me, then you probably shop a lot. But have you ever spent money even though you know you shouldn't have? Whether it was because you were bored, or stressed, or sad, or whatever, you were probably hit with a wave of guilt afterwards. If this is something you can relate to, then don't worry, you're not alone. Millions of people experience this seemingly endless cycle where shopping becomes less about getting the things you want and need, and more about escaping emotions. This is called compulsive shopping. But my question is, why do people compulsively shop, even when they know it's harmful? And what can we do to break the cycle? To answer this question, I'll be showing 3 peer-reviewed articles to help us better understand what's happening behind the scenes of compulsive shopping. For example, one study tells us that people who compulsively shop struggle with impulse control and reward processing, meaning that their brain literally pushes them to that beautiful and amazing shopping high, even when they know logically that it's not a good idea. And if this is starting to sound like something you can relate to, I'm not here to judge, and if anything, I'm right there with you. But better understanding the emotional and cognitive traps that make compulsive shopping so hard to stop, we might begin to see compulsive shopping for what it actually is, which is not a lack of discipline, but an endless loop that any one of us could fall into, especially in a world designed to keep us wanting more. So let's talk about our first study. Before this, scientists knew that compulsive shopping looked a lot like addiction for a lot of individuals, but what they didn't fully understand was why these people lost control when it came to shopping, and that is exactly what this study sets out to solve. So, researchers ran a set of experiments on individuals who struggle with compulsive shopping. The tasks that these individuals were given measured their impulse control, their emotional reactivity, and how strongly they reacted to rewards. And with this, researchers were one step closer to understanding how these individuals' brains handle temptation. What the researchers found may or may not be surprising, but people with compulsive buying habits struggle to hit that pause button and think critically about their decision. And in that same vein, they struggle with delayed gratification. They also react very strongly to reward cues, meaning they react much quicker and more intensely to gaining something new. So this tells us that there is much more to it than these people act impulsively. Thanks to the study, we now understand that people who struggle with compulsive shopping have issues with inhibition. They literally can't hit the brakes once they have that desire to buy. For example, if you gave them the option to have a smaller gift now or a bigger gift later, they would still probably choose that smaller gift, even though it's the less logical decision. They crave that immediacy. So just to be clear, it's not that these people are just tempted. Their brains are literally wired to strive for that euphoric shopping high. They strive for that feeling that they get when you get something new, that feeling that we all get. And whatever the consequences are don't matter. And the level of understanding that those individuals have of the consequences doesn't matter either. And at the end of the day, the stronger that impulse hits and the larger the reward, then the weaker their inhibition is. So the next time you're out with your friends and one of them says, "Ugh, I really shouldn't buy this right now. I don't have the money, but I can't help myself," then at least you know that they're telling the truth. This next study I'm going to talk about is about something that we are all familiar with, and that is online shopping. Before this study, scientists already knew that compulsive shopping was addiction-like. But what they didn't know is that online sites like Amazon, Shein, eBay, Depop, Temu, and TikTok Shop would only enhance this issue. To conduct this study, researchers surveyed 200 women who all shop online. They asked these women about mood, stress, loneliness, and of course, shopping habits like how often they shop. They also asked these women about more specific addiction-like behaviors, like if they ever shop to relieve emotions, if they ever spend more money than they intended, or if they ever feel like they're unable to stop shopping. Once the data was collected, the results were too clear. One of the strongest predictors for compulsive shopping was emotional distress. For example, the women who reported more stress or loneliness were more likely to compulsive shop. These same participants strongly agreed with statements like, "I can't stop compulsively shopping even when I try to cut back, and I feel relieved when I shop." And so this tells us everything we need to know. It's not about shopping, but it's about emotional relief, emotional coping. And of course, these researchers strongly emphasize how severely that online shopping can worsen these symptoms due to how accessible and quick it can be. Since we now know that shopping addictions are about emotional relief, we can begin to understand how that near immediate gratification can be incredibly harmful and dangerous to individuals with shopping addictions. Now, if you're relating a little too hard to the information I'm throwing at you, then fret not, because this next study is going to give you a little bit of hope, hopefully. So, if you're paying any attention, then you've probably began to understand that compulsive shopping is heavily tied to emotional distress. And emotional distress is inevitable. So you might be wondering, then what can we do to prevent this from happening? How can I stop myself from becoming addicted to shopping, and how can I help other people not be addicted to compulsive shopping? Well, the truth is, before this study, there wasn't a lot of research, and what research there was super scattered. Some therapists tried talk therapy, some therapists tried medication, but mostly people were left with no guidance at all. This study reviewed 13 treatment trials, including a few randomized controlled studies, which are arguably the most ideal and quintessential form of psychological research. These researchers looked at medication, talk therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy, which we will call CBT for short. Surprisingly, results were pretty clear. While medication failed to outperform placebo, CBT, particularly in a group setting, was shown to reduce compulsive shopping behavior. Why is this though? Well, therapy goes right to the source. It teaches these individuals how to recognize their emotional triggers, how to oppose the thoughts that lead to their compulsive shopping, and most importantly, how to develop healthier coping mechanisms. This is so important because now we know that people struggling with compulsive shopping are not a lost cause. When the treatment focuses on the psychological happenings of the brain, like emotions, moods, distresses, thoughts, then we are able to tackle the problem at the source and break the cycle. Okay, I hope you're paying attention because we're gonna do a little pop quiz now. Just kidding, but seriously, I hope you're paying attention because I would like for you to now better understand what's happening behind the scenes of compulsive shopping. And I hope that I was able to shed a little bit of light on that. Thanks to these 3 studies, we were able to paint a very clear picture. First, we learned that people who struggle with compulsively shopping aren't just bad with money, but seriously lack impulse control. Then we learned that stress and loneliness can drive compulsive shopping, creating this seemingly endless cycle of negative feelings, then shopping, then temporary relief, then guilt, shame, more negative feelings, and that cycle can just keep going forever and ever. And that's not even considering other potential situational factors like the financial stress that this can create. More stress and more spending, more shame over and over again. But thankfully, the last thing we learned is that there is something we can do to prevent this, to stop this and better our lives, especially better the lives of those individuals who struggle with a shopping addiction. And that is why this research matters so much. You and I have begun to understand compulsive shopping on a scientific level, and because of that, we are able to replace shame with compassion and help these individuals that are struggling. But hopefully, we are able to bring light to this and help people in the future.